After chatting, I saw Catherine off and headed home. My father must have thought the blind date went well, since I returned in a slightly good mood, which is unusual for me who never usually smiles. I told my father one thing. I turned her down. At that moment, my father flew into a rage. He said it was pathetic of me as a man to refuse. But once I knew how Catherine felt, I had no choice but to turn her down. I exploded with emotion and said to my father, "Who's the pathetic one? You know, Catherine is." After this, a surprising conclusion that no one had imagined would greatly change our destinies. My name is Mike Thompson. Apparently, it's a simple name because the one who named me likes Michael Jackson, but I quite like it. I don't have a mother. I was originally left at an orphanage as a baby and then adopted by my current father, Bob Thompson. So biologically, my father and I are strangers. I've lived my life clashing with my father like that every day. Actually, 3 years after he took me in, my adoptive mother passed away from illness, and from then on, my father raised me as a single father. As men, naturally our opinions clashed. It was the same with my grades, but my father nagged about everything, even my career path and friendships. He was stubborn and never budged from his opinions. Gradually realizing this, I stopped my defiant attitude towards my father and ended up retreating into my own world. I don't think this was a bad thing. It allowed me to maintain a certain distance from my father, and we could both cool our heads. With that somewhat distant relationship with my father, I grew up, graduated from college, and was about to leave home. My father was that kind of person until the very end. You've become a fine adult. You turned 18 and became an adult, turned 21 and could drink alcohol, and turned 22 and graduated from college. That's enough. Live as you like from now on. Just don't have any regrets. Got it? Those were the words my father said as he saw me off when I left home. Since then, I've hardly been in contact with my father, just spending the same repeated days for 7 years. I finally entered my 30s, that is, my 30s. I'm not particularly thinking about marriage. I thought it was something that brings big changes to your life, so it's not something to decide on easily. My father, who contacted me for the first time in a while as I was thinking about this, said something ruthless. "There's a good prospect for you. You're coming back home for Thanksgiving, right? I'll introduce you a lady then, so make sure you dress properly." Before I could say screw that, my father hung up the phone. My father is always like this. He prioritizes his own things over my opinions. I was upset, but judging from his tone, he's probably already setting things up. In that case, if I don't go, it will embarrass the other person. I felt sorry for the lady who got caught up in my father's selfishness. So even though I wasn't keen on it, I decided to at least go to the blind date. Several months passed since my father's call. The busy daily work also gradually settled down as the Thanksgiving approached. Many people even took paid leave. Of course, I went to the office that day and did my usual work. After finishing up work like this, I was to return to my hometown, about an hour away by plane, on the 29th. My hometown, which I hadn't been to in a while, hadn't particularly changed. If anything, I'd say there are more chain stores that I didn't see before. With a sigh of relief at my unchanged hometown, I headed to my parents' house. When I rang the doorbell, my dad popped out. "Oh Mike, you're back." "Yeah, I'm home." I responded curtly to my blunt father and went inside. It seemed my father had also finished work for the year and had been drinking since the afternoon. "You're not young anymore, so take it easy on the booze. I can get by without drinking." Saying that, my father took another can of beer from the fridge and gulped it down vigorously. Seeing this, all I could do was sigh. Ever since that day, my father had been drinking like this, as if trying to escape reality. Ever since Mom passed away, he had an abnormal liver function in his health checkup and underwent further testing, but in the end, nothing was wrong. Because of this, I felt more and more irritated watching my father drink recklessly. My father is 50 years old. While still of working age, he's not at an age where he can overdo it. For me, my father is the only family I have. I want him to be healthy and live a long life if possible. Hey, instead of worrying about me, why don't you worry about yourself? I'm aware that I spoke more coldly than even I was surprised by. However, I couldn't expect a proper response even if I asked my father gently. so I intended to scold him as strictly as possible. But my father, his face red, argued back. "It's fine. Don't worry about me. You've grown up well and you're already 30, right? Even if my body rots, I won't be a burden to you. And if possible, I'd like to join your mother soon." As if to interrupt those words, I raised my voice. "Cut it out already. I'm not telling you to quit drinking and smoking altogether. I'm telling you to do it in moderation. If something happens to you, Dad, I somehow held back the hot tears welling up, took a deep breath, and calmed myself. Maybe it had been a while since I had shown this much emotion, but my father was looking at me with a slightly surprised expression. After a while, my father let out a small sigh and said, "Listen, the lady is the same age as you and the daughter of my company's president. I've made a reservation at a restaurant, so go there. Got it? Be sure not to be rude." "I know." Tired of it, I interrupted my father mid-sentence and gave an appropriate response. Seeing my father's troubled face made my chest hurt. It's not like I want to make my father look like that, but if I care about my father, I need to be firm with him. So even if I have to play the bad guy, I want my father to live a long life true to himself from now on. Before I knew it, the Thanksgiving's TV specials had started and I realized the year had begun. As always, my father and I were silently watching TV. From an outsider's perspective, you'd think we should just be more honest with each other. But this is fine for me and my father. I slowly got up. I put on the suit I had sent to the cleaners as instructed and started getting ready to head to the blind date venue. It seems this match wasn't something only my father decided on his own, but something the woman and her father also agreed to. As my father said, the lady is the same age as me, 30 years old. Women who give birth for the first time after 35 are generally considered to be of advanced maternal age. The marriageable age for women is probably from the late 20s to 35. Considering pregnancy and childbirth, I can understand why women might be in a rush. In fact, I've seen many of my single female colleagues getting married in no time through matchmaking parties and group dates. I'm sure the lady this time probably agreed because she felt that rush too. I heard she's the president's only daughter. If that's the case, I can somewhat understand the president feeling anxious about his daughter being 30 and not even having a boyfriend. If the lady herself agreed to this blind date, I have nothing to say. But I hate liars the most. Kind lies, thoughtful lies. In the end, I think a lie is a lie. Rather than getting one's hopes up and then being let down, it's better to know from the start that there's no hope. That's why I intended to refuse this match. We're meeting for the first time, so we shouldn't be deciding right away whether to date or get married. You might call me romantic, but I'd rather to meet up by fate than this kind of blind date. That's what I think. That's why I still don't have a girlfriend at 30. Well, putting that aside, before I knew it, I was about to arrive at the restaurant my father had reserved. I had heard the lady's name in advance. Her name is Catherine Mitchell. I thought it was a beautiful name. The taxi safely arrived in front of the restaurant, and I got out of the car after paying, thanking the driver. I had never been to a high-end restaurant like this before. Of course, I go to high-end restaurants for business entertainment, but all of our clients prefer Western food. As I was thinking this, just as the taxi I had taken left, another car stopped in front of the restaurant. Out of it appeared a lady in a beautiful dress and a lady in black holding her hand. There's no mistake, she's Catherine Mitchell. I had heard about this too, but apparently Catherine is blind. To be precise, she's not completely blind. The world appears dimly lit, and her world centers around sound. That's apparently the scenery she sees and feels from her eyes. The lady in black next to her was slowly escorting Catherine towards me while holding her hand. Usually, Catherine uses a guide dog or white cane to get around. But when wearing a dress like this, it's difficult to use a white cane, and you can't bring a guide dog into a high-end restaurant. So she probably brought an attendant with her. Catherine slowly looked up and our gazes met in her jet black eyes. At that moment, she smiled softly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Catherine Mitchell." "Oh, and nice to meet you too. I'm Mike Thompson." We briefly introduced ourselves and moved to the private room we had reserved. Here, the attendant said she would step away for now and come back to pick Catherine up later, then left. From here on, it's just the two of us. I'm used to eating by myself on a regular basis, so don't worry." Saying that, Catherine ate the food brought to her with graceful movements that didn't seem like she was blind. Since she could hardly see since she was young, her senses like hearing and touch are apparently quite sharp, so she can do a certain amount of things now without people's help. The time I spent with her was more peaceful and fulfilling than I had imagined. "Is that so? You have work there, which means you are going back to work the day after tomorrow, right?" "That's right." "Geez, I never get any time off normally, so I think they could at least give me a longer break for Thanksgiving." When I said that jokingly, Catherine covered her mouth and laughed beautifully. I usually work in sales, so I have a habit of observing people. The way she holds her chopsticks, the way she puts food in her mouth, her posture. Catherine was perfect in every way. Then, noticing that I was staring at her, Catherine spoke to me. "Being stared at like that makes me embarrassed." "Huh? How should I put it? I can tell, somehow. Like if I'm being looked at. I've been looked at strangely since I was young, so even though I can't see, I've become sensitive to people's gazes." I apologized again for staring at her, but after smiling, Catherine told me not to worry about it. "I didn't feel any harshness from your gaze, Mike. It's been a while since I've met someone like you. You bring up topics as if talking to a normal person, rather than focusing on my blindness. Thank you for a truly enjoyable time." Saying that, she bowed to me, and I did the same. The blind date ended without issue, and Catherine left with a lady from earlier. Being blind is certainly a handicap, but she had a goodness that overcame that. I'm sure she'll make a wonderful wife when she gets married. Thinking that, I also headed home, and when I got back, I said this to my father. I turned her down. He probably didn't expect those words to come from me with a bright expression. For a while, my father had a look of disbelief, but gradually his face turned red and he shouted, "WH what? You turned her down? B, but she's the daughter of my company's president. It makes no sense to refuse." He shouted, his face flushed. "What do you mean? You know, she's..." The next moment, my father fell silent, probably because he heard a surprising truth from my mouth. After that, without particularly mentioning the blind date to my father, I went back. I returned to the apartment where I always live, and my usual daily life began. Everyone gets into off mode during the Thanksgiving, but once the holidays are over and work starts, they can switch gears. I still don't find work enjoyable, and sometimes I feel envious when I see people who find it rewarding. Then one day, I got a call from an unknown number on my cell phone. I ignored it 2 or 3 times, but it still didn't stop ringing. That means it's not a wrong number, and if it's ringing this frequently, it's probably not a telemarketer. Thinking that, I answered as soon as the next call came in. Then I found out the caller was Catherine. I asked my father and got your phone number. "I'm sorry for calling so suddenly. It must have been a bother." "No, I'm the one who's sorry for not being considerate. So, what's up?" Then Catherine said she's here for work now. She said she has something she wants to talk to me about, and if I have time, she asked if we could meet at a cafe or restaurant for about 30 minutes. I had no particular reason to refuse, so we decided to meet at a family restaurant after I got off work on time that day. As I was waiting at the entrance, Catherine came tapping a white cane. "Are you okay? I'll guide you from here, so if you don't mind, please hold onto my arm." "Well, thank you for that. Then I won't hold back." Catherine hesitantly put her slender arm around mine. I asked the restaurant staff to seat us at a table near the entrance. As I took the lead in ordering and getting drinks from the drink bar, Catherine apologetically said, "I'm sorry for inviting you out and then having you do everything." That day, Catherine looked like a very dignified and beautiful lady. But seeing her face again like this, I thought she was just an ordinary lady you could find anywhere. I'm sure behind that smile, she has worries and conflicts because she can't see. "No, I'm not doing this because you're blind, Catherine. I wanted to do this for you because you're the kind of person you are." The moment I said that, I felt embarrassed for saying something so straightforward, and my face started to heat up. Catherine also flinched, and then mumbled a quiet thank you. It was an indescribably awkward atmosphere, but after drinking some coffee, Catherine regained her composure and got to the point. Thank you very much for spending such precious time with me the other day. I was happy to have such an enjoyable conversation with you, Mike." And about what I said then. It's okay. I only vaguely conveyed it to my father. And to avoid any misunderstanding, let me tell you, I think you are a very attractive lady. Oh, of course, not in a weird way. So, it's not that I refused because I disliked you. When I said that in a fluster, Catherine burst out laughing. Her graceful laughter that day was beautiful, but I also found her innocent laughter now to be adorable. Thank you. I'm also very happy to have met someone like you, Mike. I wanted to meet you and tell you in case you misunderstood. You're a wonderful person. I'm sure you'll make a splendid and amazing husband when you get married. Being told that, I became so embarrassed I felt like fire would shoot out of my face. When told face to face like this rather than over the phone, I can't help but get shy. Catherine is a kind person who can be considerate of others' feelings like this. That's what I was able to understand again during this time. After that, we chatted and laughed while having dinner together, then left the restaurant. Catherine waved to me, then tapped her white cane and left. For some reason, I felt like calling my father, so I tried calling his cell phone. After a few rings, my father finally answered. "Oh, Mike, it's rare for you to call me at this hour. Dad, are you drinking again?" Exasperated, I let out a sigh without thinking. Even though I told him to cut back on alcohol, my father was drinking and drunk again. Even though it was still early, only 7 p.m., my father was slurring his words and speaking more cheerfully than usual. I don't know why, but I felt an unease in my chest. "Dad, I know it might be tiresome to keep saying it, but drinking too much alcohol is bad for you. In other words, alcohol can become poison if you're not careful. Just because you didn't have any issues in your recent health checkup doesn't mean you can let your guard down." Then, he abruptly hung up on me. He was probably in a good mood from being drunk, so having to hear my usual lecture from me again must have soured his mood. But I still sent my father an email telling him to be careful, and my bad feeling was proven right the next day. The next day, as I was getting ready to leave work as usual, I got a call from an unknown number. It seemed to be from a landline, not a cell phone. From the first few digits, I could tell it was coming from my hometown. A vague feeling ran down my spine. I slowly pressed the talk button and put the phone to my ear. The caller said they were a staff member at a large hospital near my family home, and that my father had been rushed to the hospital, so they wanted me to come. Realizing that this was the unease I felt yesterday, I immediately headed to the station and bought a non-reserved Shinkansen ticket. I somehow arrived at the hospital where my father was admitted, and through the window of his private room, I saw my father blankly gazing outside. I immediately shouted, "I told you, didn't I? Drinking too much is poison for your body. You collapsed at work, not while driving, so you were rushed to the hospital right away and somehow made it. But, Dad, don't make me worry so much." Before I knew it, large tears were overflowing from my eyes one after another. Seeing that, my father made a startled face. "Mike, why are you crying? Did he really not understand? If so, I need to make him understand. Do you think your only son can stay sane after hearing you collapsed? You're my one and only irreplaceable father. Am I going to be all alone again?" The moment I said that, my father made a shocked expression. For me, who was in an orphanage, my father in front of me is the only one I can call family. My father finally seemed to understand that, and hung his head with an apologetic look. After that, a painful silence enveloped the entire hospital room. After a while, my father opened his mouth. "Mike, you were thinking about that." My father finally realized that I had been harboring far too heavy emotions. After that, he kept opening and closing his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, my father's words retreated back down his throat. But my outburst of anger must have had at least a small impact on my father's heart. Just as I thought he was looking down with an awkward expression, my father showed a reserved smile. "Sorry, it was my fault. I never meant to suppress your emotions, but I guess my aura and words naturally made you do that. You were probably being considerate seeing me hung up on your mother all this time, right? That's all in the past. I just want you to live a long and healthy life. That's all I wish for. So don't smile with such a pained expression." When I expressed my feelings like that, my father laughed as he lowered his eyebrows and lifted the corners of his mouth at the same time. The next moment, my father said something unexpected. "I'm a no good father. I couldn't understand my son's feelings and suppressed his heart until things got like this. I'm no good. I'm a failure as a father. Dad, that's not. Just as I was about to say that, a reserved knocking sound echoed through the hospital room. When my father answered, the nurse who had guided her here gave a light nod and left. Then the person peeked in and smiled. What? Catherine, is that you? To my surprised father, I said that I had contacted her. Mr. Thompson, my father also said that drinking too much is not good, right? Mike was so worried about you that he dropped everything at work and rushed over here. Please take better care of yourself. Being scolded by a lady the same age as me, my father slumped his shoulders dejectedly. Seeing that, Catherine laughed awkwardly and let out a small sigh. Then she said something completely unexpected. When the person I admired suddenly collapsed, I was in such a panic. Today happened to be my day off from work, and when I got the call from Mike, I couldn't sit still. After that, I also got a call from my father and came rushing right away. She confessed as if it was the most natural thing. I already knew, so I wasn't particularly surprised, but my father looked perplexed at suddenly being told she admired him. But Catherine seemed to have anticipated that reaction too and said, "No need to respond. I know very well how much you care about your late wife." Saying that, she added a small laugh. Catherine is blind, but she works as a receptionist at her father's company. One time, she apparently fell in love at first sight with my father, who works as an engineer. Rather than love at first sight, it would be more accurate to say her heart was drawn to my father, who was kind to her despite it being their first meeting. But when she found out that the person she fell for had lost his wife and had a son, she was prepared to back off. However, her feelings only grew, and before she knew it, Catherine was 30 years old, carrying feelings about to burst. At that time, she received a marriage prospect. That's right, the blind date with me. When she was approached about a blind date with the son of the person she likes, she thought if she married the son. I had already heard about that from her directly. First, I have to apologize to you. I'll use you to erase my feelings through this blind date. I know this is unthinkable as a person, but please free me from this heart. On the day of that blind date, as soon as the attendant left, she said that in a despairing voice. Catherine has feelings for my father, but even if she tries to give up, she can't give up. So she thought everyone would be relieved if she fell in love with me, his son. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be strange to get angry and say, "What do you think I am?" But for some reason, those feelings didn't well up in me naturally, because I felt that each and every one of her words was weaving the truth, her honest feelings without any lies. Thank you for telling me. So that's how it was about my father. As his son, just the fact that you like my father is enough to make me happy. He's a stubborn person, and people often don't think well of him because they don't know what he's thinking. Thank you for falling in love with my father. The blind date practically failed the moment it started. No, even before it started. Catherine said she would try to fall in love with me, but that's probably impossible. Because even when we were talking about that, Catherine was overflowing with feelings for my father. I accepted all of that and offered to cooperate so she could move forward as soon as possible. And I told my father this. Catherine, has someone she admires from the bottom of her heart. I won't allow you to trample on that with your own egos. That's why I refused. Which one of us is pathetic? The parents who ignore her feelings and proceed with the blind date. I could have told him that she likes him, but I thought Catherine herself should convey that, so I kept it hidden. So my father also knew that Catherine had someone she liked, but he was probably confused to realize that affection was directed at him. My father stared at Catherine with a look of disbelief. But Catherine is serious. She fell in love with my father's straightforward personality, his stubborn yet caring nature towards his son more than anyone else, and the atmosphere when he smiled at her. After losing his wife, my father started relying on alcohol when his heart was in pain. That didn't cause me any harm, but it's true that my father's body gradually weakened from drinking too much. I couldn't bear to see him like that, so I stopped being defiant. I thought if the number of clashes with me decreased, it would curb the wearing down of my father's heart. And I thought it's not good for him to keep closing off his heart while thinking about his deceased wife forever. So I wanted to connect both Catherine and my father's hearts and make them smile from the bottom of their hearts. After hearing my story, my father scratched his head and said, "You got me." So that's why you suddenly stopped being defiant. Sigh. I've been forcing you to do unreasonable things since you were so young. Geez, I hate myself. After saying that, he slowly took a deep breath and closed his eyes as if to compose himself. A few seconds later, he turned to Catherine and said this: "I'm too old now, and with my wife gone, I can't get married. No matter how many years or decades pass, I'll always love her. Until the moment this body perishes, she will be in my heart. So, I'm sorry." Seeing my father slowly lower his head, I spoke up. "Dad, it's not good to keep dwelling on Mom forever. Just like Catherine is trying to move forward, you too." Just as I said that, my father interrupted me and expressed his feelings again. "No, your words opened my eyes. It's bad for your mother if I keep dwelling on her forever. So I've decided to just keep her in my heart to some extent. And refusing Catherine's feelings had nothing to do with me or your mother. I refused for Catherine's sake." "Huh? What do you mean?" Now it was my turn to be confused. My head was full of question marks, not understanding the true meaning of my father's words at all. Then, Catherine rarely raised her voice and laughed innocently. "Ahaha. As expected, you saw right through me, Mr. Thompson." After saying that, Catherine turned towards me. Once again, as I was about to be drawn into those black eyes, Catherine smiled softly and said, "Thanks to you, Mike, I was able to move forward. I'm attracted to your good character and straightforward personality. Even though I said something rude at the blind date, you accepted everything." After saying that much, Catherine paused for a moment and continued with her eyes glistening. "Actually, my feelings for your father were closer to admiration. On the day of the blind date, talking with you put my heart at ease. I wanted to know more about you. That's what I thought. I'm sorry, I know it must be a bother to be told this, but there's no deception in my heart. I just had to tell you that much." Bewildered by her words, I scratched my cheek with my index finger and answered in a small voice, "Then maybe we could start as friends." Then my father scolded me, "You really are pathetic." But my father was laughing, and Catherine also smiled and said, "Then let's start as friends," slowly extending her right hand. I also smiled, prompted by the two of them. After that, my father was safely discharged from the hospital. I'll lay off the alcohol for a while. If I cause any more trouble or worry for my precious son, your mother will scold me. Saying that, my father kept his promise to me. We finally returned to the relationship a parent and child should have. Also, since that day, Catherine and I frequently exchanged messages as close friends. Sometimes she would say sadly that she's holding me back because she's blind, but I, already attracted to her, answered without hesitation, "If I didn't like that, I wouldn't meet you so often like this. You're a wonderful lady, Catherine. I want you to have more confidence in yourself, and you can at least show your weakness in front of me, okay?" Those words brought her to tears. Even without clear words, my feelings must have gotten through to her. 2 years later, I quit my job and returned to my hometown, and Catherine and I got married. Although we said we'd start as friends, the truth is, there was a part of me that was attracted to Catherine too. So, a little while after my father was discharged from the hospital, I sorted out my thoughts, and we started dating seriously from the day I conveyed my true feelings. We held a small wedding ceremony with only family in attendance. On that day, Catherine shone brighter than anyone else. We had a night wedding, and that day happened to be a day when a meteor shower rained down. On my important days, stars always fall. When I was at the orphanage, a teacher once told me, "May many blessings come to you like the countless falling stars." I want to share this happiness with you too, Catherine. So once again, please become my wife. Saying that, I got down on one knee and proposed again, and Catherine answered with tears streaming from her eyes. "Of course, I can imagine walking through life with anyone but you. Please take care of me from now on." At the same time, our shadows slowly overlapped. On a night when stars fell, we made our first and last vow.